Okay, hi. Good afternoon. I hope you all still have some energy left after lunch for our streamSAVE workshop. This morning we heard a lot about designing and implementing schemes to alleviate energy poverty. We talked about the financing part, and this afternoon we want to use to give you some insights on assessing the impacts of energy efficiency schemes, alleviating energy poverty. And we will be doing that with okay, sorry. And we will be doing that with the following speakers. So my colleague Guillermo and we will present you some insights from the streamSAVE project. Then we will give the word to Katarina, who will talk a bit about the Slovenian case. Then we will give the floor to Mariana, and she will talk about insights from the EmpowerMed project. And finally, Niall will take over and give us some insights on the EnergyMeasures project. So with that, yes, I will give the floor to Guillermo.
All right. So I will start telling you a little bit about our project, streamSAVE. You will see that it's a little bit more than energy poverty, but there is a very special focus on energy poverty. And this is what we will be introducing today. So first of all, to tell you about the project, so it started as a way to deal with the mismatch between the objectives for 2030 in energy efficiency targets and the reality, the calculations that were back then projected. So the idea was that to build up somehow an advice and a knowledge creation for member states in order to implement these energy saving calculations and harmonized methods with the Articles 3 and 7 of the Energy Efficiency Directive. That, if you have been attentive this morning, you know that now is under recast, so soon enough will be a bit different. We hope better as well. And going back to streamSAVE, so one of the particularities of the project is that it included 10 actions that were considered as a priority by a bunch of stakeholders and experts that were asked at the very beginning. So normally it reflects really well the nature of the needs that these experts identified. And as I also saw in there, the project serves a bit to build this peer-to-peer capacity in order to create dialogues that will and methodological improvements that will be used once long enough after the project. That's our hope. So let's move on. Again, before we enter in the actions to alleviate energy poverty, we like to show you a little bit the whole scope of the project that, as you see here, includes many other actions like heat recovery or electric vehicles as well. For all of them, we propose corrections on the methodology for energy savings. And normally it's done in 3 blocks. The first one is knowledge facility. So we really try to improve the schemes that are methodologies that member states are currently applying. Then we create this peer-to-peer dialogue with this objective that it will scale up in the use of the tools that we propose as well. And now I think we can move on because we have also limited time. So I will give you a little bit of a view on these improvements, the calculations for energy savings. To tell you that everything, there is a nice online webpage where you can really go and check everything. Is open access, of course. So do not hesitate. You can make yourself the calculations. My colleague Kelsey will show it briefly later. So you can really check, try and things to see how are these energy savings calculations that we propose. And you also have, as you see here, I put this slide that comes directly from the website because I think it illustrates well all the things that we are addressing. So from the concept as such to the challenges, the barriers, and also the opportunities that improving these calculations are offering. So I will not obviously read all this, but for you to know that this is in the website. And more concretely, among the actions that among the topics within the action, we address 3. with different calculation methods. Today, we will only focus on thermal refurbishment. Scale renewable energy sources, and as well of the measures, which is also a little bit particular. So again, I encourage you to go and see. Now, something is happening there, but should be fine. Yeah, it's solved. No, it's not solved. It's solved in my computer. Voilà. Here we come. So, bad combination to show a formula on the screen after eating, but it's a one. Just tell you, well, we haven't reinvented the wheel. So basically, these formulas come directly from Article 7. What we have tried to do is, well, methodology for assessing energy savings have been always the same for, let's say, average households and energy poverty ones. And we try to overcome that difference, like the fact that energy poor households are not consuming, don't have at all the same consumption patterns that their average peers, let's say. So for that, probably you have heard about the rebound effect. I don't know if this is something new for you, but basically it refers to these extra consumption patterns following renovations. So somehow the end user says, okay, now I have a very pretty window installed or good insulation. I can spend more energy. I will leave the window open a bit more and things like that, right? And in the example of houses that have an EPC of A or B, but in reality they are consuming a C or D, right? But for energy poor households, we have the opposite pattern. We have households that their EPC and their building is performance is very low, like perhaps F, but they are consuming as D or C. Why? Because they are restraining themselves. They don't have the money probably to pay that, which means that we wanted to consider that limitation in our calculation. And to do so, well, we did a review of literature with a lot of inclusion criteria well defined or strictly defined, we tried, and we end up calculating that value in 35%. So basically, and again, I say that in very big words, this is just estimations that we do so our tool can operate. If you have national values or local value, regional values, it's always better to improve it. The application, the tool is known for that. But again, we wanted to keep something so people can have an overview, and we end up calculating this 35%, which contrasts to the 25% that is often allocated to the rebound effect by the literature as well. And similarly, another factor that we consider as well is the efficiency of the heating system. That will be also impacting the formula that I showed before. And as you might imagine, energy poor households as well have less efficient heating systems. And we try to reflect that by that number over there. So this is all. There is much more, obviously, in the website, but I will stop here and I will pass now.
Yes, thank you. So we also broadened the formulas and the use of the priority actions that we developed to the calculations for Article 3. I won't go into depth into the various parts. It's just for you to know that what we did for Article 7 also exists for Article 3, and of course, because CO2 savings are closely linked, we also made a formula for users to calculate the according CO2 savings. Now, where can you all find this tool? You are very eager to work with, I assume. So we have a collaborative platform. I share the link there. Yes, and there you can, this is where we, of course, put all our information together. You see here the training module is a closed off part, so you have to register for it, but then you can easily access the training module. And this is where you can then, for each of the priority actions that we define, so for the 10 that were shown in the beginning, you can make calculations for savings. You can use the methodologies to calculate the savings. So we have here, for example, the small-scale renewable heating technologies and the energy poverty one, where you see the different categories or the different measures we adapted for energy poverty. Now, yeah, they're just there with buttons, so very consumer friendly. Then there comes a sheet where you can just fill out the values. Some parts are already pre-filled, so that's the EU values. What Guillermo was talking about, these indicative calculation values we define. So, for example, the 35% for the pre-bound effect, that will all be put in here. But if you have more specific national values, something again which we always encourage, then you can choose here for the EU values, you can choose national values, and then there's a space where you can fill it out. Here above you see there is an empty Excel template. So we also made the tool into an Excel template where you then can further modify things. And another important part I want to point to is the practical guidance. So we have written down everything in detail, the methodologies for all of the 10 PAs for Article 7.3 and the CO2 savings. And we also included a part on costs. And this is all written down in the practical guidance, which can be downloaded here very easily. Then once, of course, you put all the data in, it gives you results as set for Article 7.3 and the greenhouse gas emission savings. That's about it for us, I think. I'll continue with the next presentation, and then maybe we can do we can keep the questions for afterwards. So the next speaker I want to introduce, I have to out. Voila. Sorry, I'll introduce you first. So the next speaker I want to introduce is Katarina. Thank you for saving me there. Who is from the Jozef Stefan Institute in Slovenia. And she's there responsible for the coordination with decision makers for the LIFE project Climate Path 2050. She's also a Climate Pact ambassador in Slovenia, and we're very happy to have her here to talk about the challenges that were encountered in monitoring and assessing the impacts of those measures to alleviate energy poverty.
Thank you, and thank you again for inviting me. I will try to actually point out some or highlight some challenges in monitoring through also the case in Slovenia that was done with the background studies for the development of measures to combat energy poverty in Slovenia. Just like a basic information, Slovenia, for all of you, that you will be able to understand perhaps what I will be saying a bit easier. We just have 2 million people. So when I will be discussing some policies and that kind of stuff, just have in mind that it's just 2 million people and you have like direct context to ministry and it's not any regional levels in between and that kind of stuff. So just to briefly, I will jump right to the point. Actually, recent situation in Slovenia, I cannot say current because you will see why. Energy poverty in Slovenia is addressed with the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Energy. This is actually a new ministry. Before it was divided, environment and energy were divided, and energy poverty was a part of Ministry of Energy. It was that time called Ministry of Infrastructure. So it's actually, this was the ministry who was like responsible for the money and the measures that were actually coming, the money that were coming from either climate funds or cohesion funds, and actually were more or less the only actor on the field of the energy poverty when I'm talking about like money and any kind of measures. And of course, important stakeholders is or our Ministry for Labor, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities. So of course, social policies. And what is the main actor in Slovenia? It's EcoFund, Slovenian Environmental Public Fund, who is actually responsible for all the measures and for all the money that actually comes and how to actually find energy poor people and that kind of stuff. So recently, I have to say, I know it's not the topic of today's talk, but recently we just got ourselves a new definition of energy poverty, which also came from the background studies that we did, but the government, the ministry, did a little bit of alteration, which we not agree on every point that it's now in the definition, but it's actually, I will not go through it, but we tried to actually make the energy poverty definition that it combines two different things. One is like objective, so it goes follows the household income, and the other one it's from the silk. I don't know if you know the indicators that actually how people say if they, I don't know, the roof is leaking or the windows are bad or something like that. So we try to make it objective and subjective to actually cover everything, because as you see as the second point, the ministry put also energy poverty is the state where the household, that the cost of energy users represent a large proportion of expenses. We don't agree with this because you can also do irrational things with your energy and you're not energy poor. So it's like can be also the results of bad management, but this is now in the regulation, so we will see. No, sorry, computer. Sorry. So as I said before, the Eco Fund is the main player in Slovenia, offers a number of measures already to reduce energy poverty. Among them is 100% subsidy for certain investment of renovation of residential buildings. This is for multi-apartment buildings, thermal insulation, insulation of energy efficient windows, installation of local ventilation. There's also in place 100% subsidy for replacement of old individual heating devices with new biomass heating devices. And as well in multi-apartment residential buildings, they offer 100% subsidies for exchange of old heating boilers. But the thing is, you have to be the owner of the house or the owner of the flat to be able to apply. Okay. Yeah. So actually, the big impacts of this measure are evaluated in the same way as for non-energy poor households, so it's from the national catalog. What we also have, or we had, because the money it's ran out at the moment, a financial subsidy for 500 households, for example, insulation of wall, floors, roofs, window, change of insufficient heating system, and it was like 5 million euros. But the money now, we ran out of the money, but there will be a new one probably in place because the Eco Fund got 24 million from the Climate Fund. Anyway, we also have for a very long time already Zero, a project called Zero. It's free consulting from energy consultants for energy poor households. This is also connected with the social centers. Actually, they actually contact the people, and then the consultant comes with a small package for reducing energy consumptions and tell them a little bit about how to save the energy. So actually effects from 500 to zero are not monitoring, and impacts on greenhouse gas emissions and energy are not evaluated. So what was also done within the streamSAVE is actually the thermal insulation of roof and ceiling, and this the thermal insulation of the facade, installation of energy efficient windows and front doors, and vision from these energy consultants were actually addressed within the streamSAVE, and this tool that you also presented was presented to the stakeholders at the ministry and also other ones. So, but what is actually also in parallel is ongoing in Slovenia in the development of energy poverty. It's actually the project that is also under the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Energy. And it's actually the whole background studies, and to actually the aim is to develop long-term strategy to combat energy poverty. So with all the relevant policies, measures, as well as monitoring system. It lasted from December 2001 and until this year, January. It was actually in two phases. In the first phase, it was a lot of literature review, proposition of energy poverty, and we also set the goals and everything and the indicators. And then in the second phase, it's developing measures and capacity buildings and policy interconnection. What is, for instance, interesting, because it was 3 different organizations that came together. One is Institute for Economic Research, who actually did the definitions and all these indicators and which data we can gather, what can be done, checked every year, every 2 years from the statistical offices and that kind of stuff. One is Focus, which is like NGO. So they have a lot of experiences on the field. They work with energy poor people. So they brought this expertise. And the other one is our institution, Energy Efficiency Center, Jozef, Stefan. So how this proposal for energy poverty measures was prepared. We were building on the existing measures and also the planned one. What was also a big thing for us, it's stakeholder experience with current measures. We had a lot of interviews, work meetings, workshops with people from humanitarian organizations, different ministries, social workers. We have local energy agencies. It was just a lot of brainstorming, workshops, posters. It was quite a lot of work. And of course, I'm really glad because it was a lot of literature review of measures in other countries. So I already read about some of your projects that were actually presented, or at least what's going on in some countries. So how we prepare the measures? One are for mitigation energy poverty. So what probably happened also in all of your countries recently, when the government, for instance, in Slovenia just gave out money to help to pay the gas or the electricity bills. We call that for measures for mitigation energy poverty. And then we set up also measures to reduce the energy poverty. And we divided them to organizational, financial, and non-financials. And these are the main stakeholders. Again, the ministry is an eco-fund. I'm sorry, this is in Slovenia, but it's still in the preparation and I didn't have the time to translate it. This is actually the whole, we propose now the energy poverty scheme. So at the beginning on the top, which is not exactly it's the main one when it comes to organization, it's Strategic Council for Energy Poverty, because we think it's such an interdisciplinary topic that actually ministries have to talk to each other, because now sometimes they don't. And the role will also be to monitor and how is the progress, and that other measures, for instance, by the government are not in opposite with energy poverty. And this is then the scheme actually for reducing the energy poverty in Slovenia. There is one main financial measure. So these are investment measures, and it's subsidies for energy efficiency and renewable energy measures for energy poor people. And all the others actually that are in these schemes are supportive measures. And for instance, there are project office with local consulting network, informal network for information and awareness raising, energy consulting for energy poor households, informing members of informal network, and informing and raising awareness among energy poor people. So you can see it's a lot of support that actually the money that will be for investment will actually come to the right people, to the people that actually really need the money. Okay. So actually I'm going to the challenges faced. I will go a little bit to assessing the impacts, because there was a lot of challenging. There's also, of course, we were thinking about how to assess impacts. We went through methodological literature review, and also that we came out that good data is crucial. So also what was actually proposed should be done is questionnaire for energy poor household before and after the measures, and also questionnaires for control group. But what was difficult, these were what people told us, that these people that are energy poor, at least in Slovenia, they're so vulnerable and they don't let people in, that it will be really hard actually to come at the beginning with a questionnaire, I don't know, for half an hour. And then afterwards, when you do the measures again, because they say that they already exposed themselves as being energy poor, and then you come again, some official from, I don't know, from the capital comes again and wants to get, I don't know, a lot of data from me. Although we predicted this in a measure, that we will actually study the option to assess the situation 6 months or 1 month after the implementation of the measure, for instance, renovation. We will see if there will be any, I don't know, with any additional subsidies, or that they will, we were still thinking how to actually do this. But as I said, we are cooperating with a lot of different stakeholders from social and also from the other NGOs to how to find the best way to actually get the data that will be really useful to have. What is also perhaps specific for Slovenia, we have a lot of big houses in the countryside. 80% of apartments or houses in Slovenia, it's owned. And if you want to, for instance, assess the impacts or measures when we're talking about energy efficiency, how much energy you saved and greenhouse gas emissions, If you have a big house and the lady, I don't know, was heating up one room, and then after the measure, she will be heating 2 or 3 rooms because the whole house will be isolated. Is this really how you can actually assess the impacts when you're talking about greenhouse gases or about the energy savings? So this is also like an issue that we were also faced with. And also sometimes people say from the that are actually working in the field that they're like crumbling buildings, that buildings are actually falling apart. And then you're again, do you even go and, for instance, try to renovate the house? Is the impact even like worth it if you're looking it through again through the eyes of greenhouse gases and energy savings, or to what do you do? So what was also we were discussing for different stakeholders that those measures for the energy poverty, the priority is actually to improve the quality of living for those people and living standards and also health conditions for these people, and to get help actually to the people that need it because they live in such a conditions. So assessing perhaps the impacts on energy savings and greenhouse gas emissions in this case is not the priority. What we got, like for instance, from the people working on in the field. Just some other challenges. We heard it before that we really should interconnect the interconnection of energy and social policies and working together, capacity buildings, how to include, this is also what we're facing with, how to include people with the measures that are energy poor and are tenants. Because now we just have measures for the people who are owners. So what to do with the tenants? How can we actually help them? Because they're then stuck in a loop. You're paying a rent, a high rent, your house is inefficient, but you cannot do anything about it because you don't have the money and the owner doesn't want to do it. So how to find a way to help them? And also to guarantee a constant financing for energy efficiency and renewable energy measures, because now sometimes it comes the money from cohesion fund, then 1 year there is like nothing, and then it comes money from the climate fund. It's not, and for these people it has to be consistent, or that you know the measures and everything. And also addressing other policies as well is like general housing policy, health and inequalities, and that kind of stuff. Just briefly, what is next? We have to include this into the update of the energy poverty in the National Energy and Climate Plan. And we're also preparing at the moment, the same group, the action plan for energy poverty that has to be done until June this year. It's actually how to have everything what we have down in the background studies to actually that will come to life, because I think this will be really challenges that what we wrote, it reads really nice on paper, but then the government and the other institution will have to execute it. And the key question is who, what, until when, and why. Why we know, but until when. So thank you for your attention.
All right, so thanks a lot. Well, we are a bit short in time, so I propose to move. If you have no problem. If you have questions, just keep them in mind, and we will have time later. We hope, and otherwise anything. So yeah, to move on. Yeah, I have in Spanish my chuleta to present. Yeah, please, yeah. So now I have the pleasure to introduce you Mariana Jiménez. So she works in the IREC, which is the Energy Research Institute of Catalonia in Spain. She will be telling us about the EmpowerMed project, which, by the way, is finishing in some months that they have there.
The month. So if you want to check the project's website, you will find the agenda and everything. It will be here in Brussels as well. So if many of you are located, maybe are interested, to check it out.
I just learned that today. It's messing up with the time that I have to introduce her, but I thought it was more interesting than what I was going to say. So anyways, you know that event is taking place. And well, she will be talking about this project, which has overall the objective to empower the women in tackling energy poverty. So you will see that is a very interesting approach.
Thank you. So hello, as Guillermo mentioned, I will present you some of the work we did in EmpowerMed, which is, as most projects here, focusing on energy poverty, but the special characteristic of EmpowerMed is that it focused on Mediterranean countries. So it was mentioned before, but for example, in the Mediterranean, one of the challenges is keeping households cool in the summer and not just hot in winter. So the project has also a very strong gender perspective, and we also cover some health aspects of energy poverty, and it has pilots in 5 countries, so Albania, Croatia, France, Italy, Slovenia, and Spain, sorry, 6. And I work in the pilot in Spain, which is based in Barcelona. And we have different objectives that many are common to other projects, which is raising public awareness about energy poverty, implementing and studying practical solutions, and formulating local, national, and EU policies to address this issue. And today, for this presentation, I will focus mostly on the second objective, that was implementing solutions and try to assess their impacts and see which ones work better and why. So what were the actions that we implemented? There are 5. So collective assemblies, household visits, do-it-yourself workshops, support to financial schemes, and health workshops. And today I will focus on the first 2. Collective assemblies are reunions that are recurrent where people attend, and the particular characteristic is that the help or the support comes from the same affected people. So there is someone monitoring the reunion or moderating it, but the advice and the accompaniment and everything actually comes from the same affected people. So I think that's something that's really nice. And then household visits is an energy audit that is done by visiting the household and taking some data about the conditions of the building, doing some recommendations, implementing some changes, and with this, trying to reduce the consumption while improving the conditions at home. So I will present you some of the tools that we use to gather data for these 2 actions, but I just wanted to mention that we also did a more detailed study in Spain, because it was the only country that allowed us to access people's smart meters data. So in Spain, practically all households have smart meters, but the other interesting thing is that you can access it online. So you don't actually have to go to people's home. If they give you permission, you can access their smart meter and download data and study it. So that was very nice to try to do a characterization of consumption at affected households, which show some of the things that were already mentioned, that in general terms, affected households consume much less energy that they actually need. So another interesting point is, okay, we did some measurement, but we have predefined some performance indicators. So most of these are the ones that everyone used, like what were the energy savings, what were electricity heat savings, emission savings associated with these energy reductions. We also have a look at water savings, because some of the measures were to reduce water consumption. We also look at how this reflected in cost reduction for the households, and if in some cases families were able to get out of debt after the intervention of the project. And we also try to gather some data on health and gender. We have more data just for statistical purposes, but let's say in health, our only performance indicator that we had in the beginning was how many people participated in the health workshops, which now at the end of the project, we would like to actually could have had more, because it's something that you have a lot of impact, but it's really difficult to quantify, like how much you improve, for example, the mental health of someone. But it's something that we see that the project had a lot of impact in, but let's say it's difficult to quantify it. And in terms of gender, the important thing that we did and that we encourage other projects to do is to always have data disaggregated by gender. So for household visits, what we have was an Excel tool that the people that went to the households had to put some data regarding what were the building conditions, what kind of appliances were used, what were the current consumption levels, etc. And for each region, there was some data that was already included. So with all this data and the measures that were implemented that they had to indicate, the Excel tool calculated automatically what were the expected savings. But for example, these savings were calculated based on the actual consumption level of the households. And then analyzing all the data that we had, we realized that some households with these building conditions and the energy they were consuming they for sure were not having the indoor temperature that they needed to have in order to be healthy. So this is something that we need to improve. That is actually related to what Guillermo explained, that there is some adjustments that need to be taken into account when you are calculating efficiency savings in energy per household. And for collective assemblies, there was another tool that was a bit more simple, because in collective assemblies, for example, practically no energy savings were achieved. Most of the savings were only in the economic area, because, for example, through the collective assemblies, people was able to get access to a scheme that reduced their final bills, or they got into a program that allowed them to be cleared out of debt. So things like that had an impact in them, but it was not seen as an energy reduction. So the tool was only to keep track of what was happening in the different meetings, but because the project lasted 3 years, and more or less every 2-3 weeks there was a collective assembly. Here also to mention that most of the impact that we achieved through this action came from Spain, because in Spain the collective assembly had already some history, because there was first an assembly done for people helping other people preventing evictions. So of course, people in this situation tend to be affected by energy poverty. So let's say they transition to the collective assembly on energy very easily. Whether in other countries, we had to start everything from zero, and getting the network, reaching people, getting trust, it was more difficult. So, well, most of the impact came from Spain. So just to give you some number, regarding household visits, we had a total of 577, and most of these actually happened in Croatia and Slovenia. Also important note is that in Spain there were no household visits planned. This was a decision from the partners in Barcelona. So Croatia and Slovenia were the most active, and we calculated emission savings of around 1.1 gigawatt hour per year. But with this situation that I mentioned, that maybe in the end you will actually see these savings, because okay, people will have more efficiency, but they will need to increase their consumption to maintain a more healthy indoor temperature at home. So we also registered 4.5 thousand meters of water per year, and emission savings of around 250 tons per year. And of course, as well, when we observe the data from the different regions, we observe that these savings are associated to different fuels. So in some countries, there was a lot of use of butane, for example, whereas in others is wood, or in others there are more electrical appliances, and in others is mostly fossil fuels. So there is a high regional difference, even though they are all in the Mediterranean area. And this is also related to the fact that we had different economic savings registered per country. And in collective assemblies, we had a total of 1,850 people participating, and through all this accompaniment, access to social aids, etc., we registered a total of 49,000 euros saved, and we managed to register 21 families that got out of debt. As I say, most of these were registered in Spain for the reasons that I already explained. And just as a final note, what we want to stress, that was already mentioned also by previous speakers, is that in energy efficiency programs that are addressed to poor households, it's important, of course, to quantify energy savings, emission savings, and so on, but we need to take into account these adjustments, and we also need to incorporate other KPIs that sometimes are forgotten, but for example, but what is now the temperature at home? And we know that for certain temperature or below a certain temperature, there are health risks. So how many of these risks are we avoiding by allowing these families to consume more energy? So that is the main message, but also, for example, we try to compare how much it costs to implement these actions. And what we observe is that household visits are efficient in getting these savings, but they take a lot of time and a lot of effort in terms of people visiting the households, etc. And with community or collective assemblies, once they are well installed, it's actually very easy to reach a lot of people with less effort, because as well, the same people is helping each other. And also that has another component, because part of the objective of the project was to empower people. So not just helping them, but giving them the tools to solve their situation themselves. And I think people feel really empowered when they give advice to someone that is going through the same situation as they know. So, well, I think that's that would be all. And so if you have questions later, we can discuss.
Yeah, that's good. Yes, thank you. Then for our last presentation, I would like to introduce Niall Dunphy from the University College of Cork, where he is a director of the Cleaner Production Promotion Unit, and he will be talking about the EnergyMeasures project, another Horizon 2020 project, which works to address energy poverty in 7 European countries through 2 complementary and synergistic strands of work. But I am sure that he will be better able to explain what the project is about and the impacts that he can give some insights on.
Thank you. It was always difficult to be the last speaker on a long day, so hopefully I won't put you to sleep. So the EnergyMeasures project is, one more project that's aimed at energy poverty. It is due to end next February. We got a 6-month extension because of COVID. It was very much a bottom-up project, so we're really reaching people on the ground, people that haven't been reached before. So by holding energy clinics, by going out into the community, so it's a very labour-intensive, on the ground approach, which obviously in the context of social lockdowns was not very conducive. I've broken the machine, my apologies. I can continue, yeah. So the project is based on, it's based on 2 approaches, very much a household level engagement and then public policy. And it's the household level engagement that I'm going to talk about today as PowerPoint updates in the background. So what we're doing with the household level engagement is that we're engaging a variety of households, which I'll go through in a moment, but we're engaging them through a face-to-face contact, where we discuss and talk about their energy practices, very much a conversational tone, so they can take up to 90 minutes. So this is a way of exploring how they relate to energy, what energy means to them, what their energy priorities are, and get a kind of a qualitative understanding of how energy poverty impacts on their lives. Also take an initial view on their dwelling, and at a kind of a high level, what are the kind of low hanging fruit, if you like, that can be addressed through this project. So project then assists the households with a tailored energy behaviour plan, coupled with some low cost and no cost measures which are deployed with the households, and followed up with ongoing engagement, both remote and in person. And we'll eventually get back to the slides in a moment. So I can't, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so we're engaging in a variety of countries, ranging from the Western Isles of Scotland, which are very remote households. Sometimes there's 5-6 kilometers between households. It's a chain of islands. So just visiting 5 or 10 houses could take a day, to multi-family dwellings in Bulgaria and North Macedonia, where you have, tens of houses all in one block, all signed up. So it's quite a variety of contexts. Obviously, the socioeconomic context is different, but the sociocultural context is also different. And all of this impacts on how the project is implemented at the local level. I think we might have something here now. But today we're going to learn about energy poverty and PowerPoint. It's the 2-for-1 offer as we do this. I'll stand out of the way and allow the technical experts to get on with that. So I suppose the rationale for the project is that we have a variety of countries. We have 4 countries which are, if you like, come from the old Europe or the Western Europe, if you like, those that are probably have been to the forefront in many ways in the origins of the concept of energy poverty, of fuel poverty. And then we have 3 post-socialist countries, which have their own specificities and their own issues. And that diversity is quite important to the project as well, and understanding that. So it's very much a tailored approach is being taken in each country. There's something happening here in the background, so I'm expecting amazing stuff any moment now. This just shows you should never put too much time into PowerPoint. It never pays off. Okay. So as I was saying, the idea then is that we engage with these different types of households in different communities. And as you see on the screen here now, thankfully, we'll see that we have, in Ireland, we have targeted elderly people living in owner-occupied houses in urban areas. In Bulgaria, North Macedonia, and Poland, we're looking at occupants of multi-family apartment complexes. I mentioned the remote and the Skies Islands. In Belgium, then there's energy poor tenants in mixed income areas, and in the Netherlands, there's public and private tenants in low income urban areas. So we have quite a diversity of households, quite a diversity of dwellings, therefore a diversity of approaches in engaging those and in collecting the information. So we work with households, as I said, to capture their knowledge and understanding around energy, analyze how to use energy and how that intertwines with their everyday routines, habits, and expectations. And as I said, it's to develop an understanding of how they relate to energy, what their energy priorities are for them. We also engage with them to understand the physical characteristics of their household, and we then select and deploy a tailored package of low-cost measures. I mentioned that we have tailored or bespoke behaviour change plans, and these are informed by the understanding of their practice and behaviours around energy that we've developed through the engagement with them. And through this, then we encourage, enable, and we would hope support the householders to change their energy-related behaviours and practices. So I did say there's a diversity of housing types, diversity of household structures. There's varying regulatory and commercial contexts, and there's different and be very different social, cultural, and political realities in each of the countries we're working in. And this, I suppose, this obliges us then to approach data collection very differently in the different areas and the different households. So for some, it's as simple as collecting their physical utility bills. And many households do have them. Even in many cases, if they're in a box, they're not opened, but they're there. Obviously, the advantage or disadvantage of this is that it's very labor intensive. There's likely to be data gaps, so you will need to extrapolate from that. But often it's the first time these householders have really looked at their household bills, and it offers a good opportunity to start a discussion with them, to give them some energy literacy by reviewing the bills with them and talking through that. So I find that quite useful in a number of areas. Sometimes then, particularly in the multi-family apartment blocks, the data might be available from the building managers. And they act as intermediaries in many cases in the provision of energy. And householders either bill either directly or indirectly by building management. So it may be a flat fee in some cases, or it may be a bill. But again, by looking at this data with the householders, it's the same effect. The first time they've really considered energy, particularly if they're just paying that flat fee. And it also encourages the building managers, in fact, to look at energy as a discrete cost. Increasingly, and we mentioned by the previous speaker how in Spain there's able to get data direct from the smart meter. Sometimes the smart meters and online accounts offer a way in to get data in a very manageable way, and many utilities in various countries offer quite sophisticated metering and online account systems, and that can allow access to historical data use. And occasionally it might even be user friendly, not always, but occasionally they do that. Some even offer the ability to download data, but again, don't make that easy either. So this is an opportunity, I suppose, to maybe have to introduce or to reintroduce the householders with their online accounts. Many of the households who we've dealt with didn't even know they had an online account or that could access their information in that way, and that we support them in getting the most from that. So if that's there, it's a very good way of doing it also. We've had some approaches and we're currently in the process of getting this, and we hope that it will be successful in working through network operators to get the data directly from the source. So if householders provide the appropriate authorization, the data should be available from energy suppliers. The problem is that that's multiple suppliers in each country. It also doesn't take into account where people might have changed suppliers or where suppliers have gone out of business, and a lot of suppliers in many countries have gone out of business during the latest energy crisis. So therefore, going to the network operator offers a way of getting that data, and it can be very useful in that way too. And this offers the opportunity again for the energy advisor to really engage with the householders on their detailed energy use. We've also, in many cases, deployed energy saving power meters to allow the householders themselves to play around with them. So we leave them with them to determine which of the appliances are the most energy intensive, to identify what we might call energy hotspots, and then therefore they can make decisions on use. And often it's the things that people don't really expect to be using the most energy, use the energy, because there's quite poor energy literacy out there. So this again, it increases the energy literacy of the households. I suppose all of this is in the context of impact, and I was asked to speak about impact. So in doing this, I suppose what we have found the impact of this type of engagement on data collection is that there's increased knowledge in the households on energy use. There's more confidence in dealing with utilities. For many of the people we're dealing with, it's the first time that they're actually engaging with the utility, other than to give them money or their building management. It allows the identification of what might be called energy hotspots, where a lot of energy is being used for particular operations in the household. And it leads to changes in energy-related behaviour, so direct changes. So people understand, the washing machine, you can tell them all you want that the washing machine is going to use a lot of energy, but if they can see the meter, it really goes into their head. And suddenly people are a lot more inclined to follow the advice on only having full loads, on using lower temperatures, because they can see the difference that makes in the energy use. but it also leads to increased engagement on energy issues. And I suppose subsequently to that, because the very fact that you're engaging with them on that means more indirect engagement. Therefore, the more interested in energy, the more inclined to listen to the advice that's been given, and that they, that they will actually follow the plan that little bit better, we hope. So in measuring the impact of this, we offer a lot of, we get a lot of feedback from householders. This is, phone calls, emails that come from them directly. We have surveys and questionnaires. So we have surveys on behavior change. We have questionnaires on their energy use. And all of this brings in data of different types, both qualitative and quantitative. Interviews. So at the start of our project, we have an in-depth, semi-structured interview where we take them through their use of energy and their relationship with energy. But also towards the end, then we also re-engage with them and see how that has changed. We have focus groups, group interviews. Some people can be very useful to try and gather a more high-level view on energy use and a particular community. And then I suppose the energy consumption one is obviously important as well. But I'll put that in parentheses here. It's obviously very important that's what a lot of these energy poverty projects are about, is about reducing energy consumption. But I do think it's a mistake that we link energy poverty with reduced energy consumption so much, because as has been said by many speakers, for many of the people we're dealing with, they actually need to increase their energy consumption. So it's something that needs to be taken into account. So when we talk about energy savings, we're not necessarily talking about the energy savings about what they were using before, but maybe what they should have been using. And it's a different way of looking at it. I think that's an important factor in the way that we approach things. Thank you. My apologies for my part. Thanks.
So I think now we should have some time for questions. So I invite you all. But I will take perhaps the privilege to start myself. And from Niall. So I was following your presentation with a lot of attention. I was wondering, like, in many cases, I believe it's not realistic to have such a level of feedback for people. You don't have the time or the resources to provide them that level of feedback that you are fortunately giving in this project. That means that many people are again not addressed. So despite on the fact that maybe like in Spain or I know in France as well, smart meters all over the place. How would you propose, or from your own experience, what are the most important messages or the type of information that people really need to save energy? When we talk, of course, about their consumption. So knowing their consumption, about their consumption, but you cannot give them a tailored feedback, or a very specific feedback. So how would you, what would you tell them? What kind of information would you use for that?
Key thing is for people just to think about their energy use, to be conscious about their energy use. And this is what's often not done. People tend to put their head in the sand like an ostrich. The energy bill comes in, it's very high, I can't pay it. It just goes on top of the last energy bill, and I keep carrying on until the energy is cut off. Whereas, thinking about what uses energy, and this is where simple tools like the energy power monitors that can enable the householders themselves to to play around with different appliances and see how they can save energy can be very useful. And that doesn't need that much resources. I think that's the approach, that you just need to think about their energy use more. But that does need some support, because not everyone has the knowledge or the agency to do that.
Interesting. All right. So
we'll take questions from the audience. Great.
Just, my name is George Benke from Austria. Also, question to you: what about the pre-pay meters? What about your opinion? Because there, the people see much more how the consumption is just in time, because they have to first to pay for the energy, and maybe after this time they have some experience. Yeah. How long they can work with this energy? Because I think there are some ways to the prepayment meters in the directive.
So yeah, you're right that those who have prepaid meters have far more visibility on their expenditure of energy, but maybe not enough knowledge on what particularly they're using it for. And it also leads to many cases where people do self-curtail their use or self-ration at certain times as they come near the end of their thing and wait for their next payment. So there's an element of that. But in many cases, the data is there. It just needs to be got, and they need to be helped, I suppose, to understand the data better. One of the great mysteries to me is that self-pay meter residents are no risk of non-payment to utilities. They pay in advance, and yet in many cases they pay more. And this is something that really needs to be addressed. I think there's an opportunity there for a social enterprise to bundle that in that. You have a ready-made market of guaranteed payment.
Yeah, hi, Juan Carlos from the Belgian Federation of Social Services. I had a question for Mariana. I was wondering on gender disaggregated data, what are some good practices? Is it based on self-identification, for example, of people who come to the assemblies, or do you also count people who make up the household? Or how was this data obtained? Just to think about good practices for my own work. Thank you.
Well, I think they were both, but for example, in household visits, one of the things that we gather data is who has the contract with the utility provider. And of course, if you see the results, most of the contracts are to the male person in the household, or who was in charge of taking decisions about energy service. And in most cases, is the husband, let's say, but actually most of the participants were women in the program. So there you have a problem because most of the participants are the women, but they are not the ones in charge of making the decisions. They don't have the name in the contract, so they cannot actually do changes without consulting with their husband first. So I think gathering this data is important because it gives you an overview of these gender dynamics that also influence the changes that you can do or not. And in the collective assemblies, it was self-identified. So we actually, we have like the category for male, female, and also no-binary people. And for example, here we also register who was talking in the assemblies. And one of the objectives of the project was to encourage more women to participate and provide advice to other attendees.
Quentin Hofer, French Housing Agency. I had a question for Katarina. You talked about the Eco Fund, and I wanted to be sure that I understand well. Does it take in account 100% of the cost of the renovation when you talk about 100% subsidy?
Yeah, but just for some measures, as I said, it's like for changing, for instance, the heat boilers in the multi-storage building, because they pay you. I mean, this is like the whole building is paying, so they cover your share if you have an apartment in the building. And it's also, for instance, 100% for renovation. If you're also renovating like the facade or like isolation, they pay your share that you have to pay because you own the apartment in a multi-apartment building.
And do you have guardrails measure? Because you have guardrail measure because what we saw that in funds that the more money you put into funds, the more expensive the intervention gets, because companies tend to raise the price because you have more public funds in that are put for the people. So I don't know if you have the same problem in Slovenia.
I'm not sure. I'd never heard this from the people from EcoFund, but I've heard like also story. I think it's not a lot of people actually apply for this, because then the whole like building knows that you're energy poor, and they say it's still a stigma because people don't want to say the government will pay for my share, for instance. So this is the issue that I know they said, but they never said about increasing but when they had, for instance, 0500, when they were renovating like buildings from like the house and everything, I think then the person actually chose who will actually be working, I don't know, isolation or the roof or changing the window. So, and then the government actually paid. But now what we are thinking to make it easier to have the pilot case, that actually the Eco Fund will go for a public procurement, and they will actually found somebody that will do for one region or something, that they will actually have a contract. But this is we know that this could be the challenge. They will raise the prices, and because they will know the government is paying. So,
is there another question from the audience? Otherwise, I go to the online participants.
There are a couple of questions online for Mariana, and one was from Daniele Bergisio, who's asking who was filling the data in the questionnaires, the potential beneficiaries directly, or someone helped them out. In his experience, households do not generally fill it in by themselves, but need help by someone better knowing the subject.
Yeah, no, it was filled by someone. So in case of the energy audits, it was the auditor that visited the household. In the collective assemblies, it was the moderator who was filling the table that I showed you. And in case of this particular group that we gathered very detailed data through the smart meters, we also did some thermal comfort monitoring campaign, etc. We did a very detailed survey, and it was filled by one of us, mostly me. So they responded, but there was always someone from the project in charge of filling to ensure that everything was done properly.
Another question from Paula Fonseca is, what is the procedure to access smart meter data?
You have to register in the distributor website, so it has to be done by the contract holder, which was actually some problem that we found because some of the affected people does not have the contract at their names. So if you are not the contract holder, then you cannot access. It must be created by the contract holder, but once you have the account, it's actually pretty easy. You can enter the data as some things that Niall showed, and you can download the data in CSV file and from like many months before, since the start of the contract of the person.
And the last question for Mariana from Neriman is, why do you think the number of participant households was limited, although EmpowerMed project covers 6 countries? Was that your simple choice, or the ministry or municipality decided that? Did or could those households not included in house visits participate in the regular assemblies?
In Spain, it was a decision of the partner because their view was that the project must do actions that involve the least, that were at least invasive as possible. So they actually didn't want to visit the household of the people that was participating in the assemblies. And it was also decided by the same people, so we respected that. And in the other countries, they say, okay, let's try. But the number of households that we reach really depend on the presence of the local partner. So for the local partners that have been working on these issues for long, they had more trust from people, so we could access more households. And for those that were new, which was, for example, the case of Italy, and especially in COVID time, people was even more reluctant to let strange people in. So that really influenced like how long had the local partner been working on these issues and what was the established relationship already with the community.
Thank you. And I have a question for Katarina as well, from the same participant, Neriman. The question is, why did you need to define the energy poverty for Slovenia? Is an EU-level definition not comprehensive enough? Will this not change funding needs from EU budget according to national definitions?
It's because we put it in the National Energy and Climate Plan to be exact, that we will prepare the definition for the energy poverty. And also what we find, I think, on the EU level, there also, I'm not sure if it's just one, because I remember we faced with different definitions in different countries, but I don't remember at the moment how it's for the EU, because it's not, I don't think there is an official energy poverty definition, so. Sorry.
Yes.
Coming back to the issue of okay, you know, some of you might know that I'm a bit a geek of energy evaluation. So I will come back to this issue of monitoring energy savings, and okay, I of course I agree with the problem that you need to take into account a different baseline in case of the having both objectives of energy efficiency and energy poverty alleviation. But we also heard this morning of the issue of possible frauds, possible defaults in the quality of the installation of the measures. So how do you, did you experience that? And do you have a method that would help to separate the, because at the end, that's all drivers or all reasons for differences between theoretical and actual energy savings, right? So do you have a method or some thinking about that, how to separate the part that comes from pre-bound effect on the one hand, and the part that would come from frauds, from defaults in installations and so on? So I don't know if you said, maybe Niall, you want to answer that or not? That's for all of you actually, but I don't know if that's something that you looked at in your projects, the possibility that the actions that are installed are not as good as they should, which might also be a reason why you get less impact than you would have expected.
Well, in my case, I don't have an answer because actually that's the point that we want to focus now. Now that we've gathered a lot of data, we understand better. I think that would be our next step. So if someone else has a comment, I will pay a lot of attention.
The EnergyMeasures project, we're looking at small, low-cost measures. So the actual installation of them is not that relevant, but I suppose the deployment of them or the use of them or people's behavior may not change as much as they have. So that has to be taken into account. So really there's an element of judgment. The surveys, there's the questionnaires we're engaging, we're getting information from the clients, from the householders, and then you have to read between the lines, But I think what you're talking about is probably the larger scale interventions at building levels, and I understand absolutely that can be the case, can be important. So perhaps more relevant in Slovenia.
Yeah. No, but perhaps at this stage, as I said, because we're preparing the measures and all these schemes and stuff, we're not so much focusing already now on the impacts, but we will have to do this in the action plan, I'm sure. So what actually lesson learned that actually we got mostly from EcoFund, for instance, we tried to include into the new measures. So that's why we have this a lot of support from the information and how to access people and like these local offices that will actually, or the national office that will actually include people from technical skill with people from social skills and that kind of stuff. This is all the information that we gather from the previous experiences and try to actually to change now in the future how the measures will work. But as I said, like the impacts and everything from the new measures, this is still what we'll have to do, how to monitor and to access the impact.
Yeah, and perhaps just to add on this, so funnily enough, I had noted here to talk to Mariana about this, the level of detail of the data to answer that as well, because I was wondering the same. And concretely, I was wondering what's the level of, the disaggregation of that data. Can we really estimate such a problematic from the data we have? I know, for instance, the quality of the data in Spain, I think it's not the same as France. France is a new generation of smart meters, so probably there is better quality data, but I think it's an open question, and we'll be very happy to discuss it with you later. So yeah, we have the same issues in streamSAVE. We did this review literature, and there is not responses so far, and that's so open question in the future. Now, well, I had another question, but I probably give you the. Yeah, can I? Yes, I wanted to jump on we still have time, and we are not often so many people interested in the topic are on the same table, so let's enjoy until the last minute, if possible. I just wanted to go back to the EcoFund again in Slovenia, because you mentioned something that was really interesting for me. You said at the beginning that they were trying to promote, to fund biomass installation, and then you mentioned also renewable energy sources. And I was wondering whether that's only referring to this biomass or other technologies as well.
No, the measurement that is actually in place is just for the biomass. It's for the individual households, the houses. So they change your system for the new with the one with the biomass.
because my reasoning was, okay, it would be very interesting if there is also in place mechanisms, for example, to fund collective action initiatives of PV installation in.
This is what we planned in the new measures also to include energy poor households to kind of like shape it that they will also be able to participate in that kind of stuff.
Be wonderful. Thank you.
Dick van der Seuven again. I would like to come back briefly on the smart meters, which has been mentioned before. Just an open question. I don't have the answer myself, or not even an indication of an answer, but I heard that you can sometimes have quite detailed data. One anecdote is that you can see the number of pancakes people have baked in the afternoon. That's an exaggeration, of course. But my basic question is, you mentioned the analysis can take time. Would it be conceivable, or would anyone in the audience here know of experiences where it can be automated, that from the data you could have an indication this kind of device in your home is not functioning properly, or there is an anomaly? Or would there be any experience of automated things like that? Okay, I see someone in the audience.
During the last years, I have made about 500 different analyses of the power loads of mainly companies. Here it's quite simple to have a saving without visiting the company by about 10%. But the households are so different, yes, in the use, because if you use a coffee machine in the morning, you have the peak and then it goes down. So it will not work as standardization, yes. You really have to take a look and see what's going on in the household. Even the companies, it's more that it's an experience, and we work together with university, and it didn't work, that we make some standards. So, and in households, it's really quite different. So it will not be some automatization. Sometimes you know it. I have done something wrong in the household, but it's not in the way that you can really make good advice. Yeah. It's more or less it's experience from the expert which is in front of the system. But sometimes you stand up at 6 in the morning, next time you stayed 8 in the morning, so it's quite different. To have the same power line each day at the households, no, forget it. In the company, yes. Okay.
And here I wanted to show you what we did. It's kind of an automated process, but not for like evaluating consumption, but what we did was using this data to provide user the advice on which tariff to contract that represented the least cost for them. So we downloaded data from the smart meter, we connected to the system operators API servers that gives you the electricity price per each hour. And then, can you pass to the next slide? It's not a picture. Okay, but after this, they got like automatically a report that in very simple words says, okay, for you, the best tariff is this one with this type of use, use of network charges. So we recommend you to contract this. And with this change, you could save up to X euros per year. And we provided some graphs showing their consumption, and also we check if the contracted power they have was the optimal, or if they could lower it down, and also how much money they would save from this. So we did it automatically, but we have to create our own tool. And within the project, we tried to design it in a way that everyone could use it without installing any additional software. But it was not very easy because certain months, the distributor decided to change how the data was presented. So this happens like 4 or 5 times within the project, and then you have to modify the tool, and you need to have some programming skills to do this. So people came and say, hey, it doesn't work anymore. And we check, and it was because they have changed how data was presented. And so in the end, we always have to be involved to ensure that the tool was working and people could get some information out of their smart meter data.
Okay.
Just one small thing. What this discussion does show is the danger, this data analysis, that a lot can be extrapolated from the data. I suppose we're all familiar with the myth of the woman who got vouchers from her supermarket, loads of baby stuff, because they knew she was pregnant before she did. You know, data is very dangerous when used incorrectly, and we need to be careful of that. In this project as well that we're talking about, we're also, in some of the households, we're installing remote heating control devices, which can be very useful, but then also can be used in very aggressive ways. People who are in aggressive relationships, where there's spousal abuse. You just imagine the stereotypical middle-aged man at work saying, "Heating's on, I'm going to turn it off now." Those type of controlling relationships. So we really need to think about all these things when we think about data and how it's used, how it's shared, and who has access to it.
One more? Okay. Last question.
Yeah, I would have one question from my streamSAVE colleagues. You presented the streamSAVE method and the indicative values you collected from the literature about rebound and pre-rebound effects, but that was before the level of energy prices we know currently. So how do you see that? Do you expect these values to be completely different now with this level of energy prices?
I think the literature review we did was over, it did span over some years. I don't know whether there was a comparable energy crisis there. I don't think so. So that's indeed a valid point, where the rebound at least might not be as big as those values indicate. Yeah.
No, absolutely. There is also cases, even in, recent literature showing, for example, the case of Portugal, which are really pushing forward in the topic. And they show that their estimations are much larger than the 35% we have estimated. They are talking sometimes about 80%. So we are talking really, of course, in Portugal, you have the double problem that sometimes we forget, but this is also the cooling. As it was mentioned today, this is also a problem indeed, more people in Portugal complain about the problems to cool down their homes than to heat up. So it's a bit of something to take into account as well. So you're fully right. I think this is something we should consider. Now, all the calculations, the report, everything is there, but in the future, the tool is open for these kind of things, so we can always modify them. But indeed, we just wanted to provide a value, an indicative value that allows a calculation, but should be, and in the future, I hope it will be corrected. Just to mention that he worked with that in the project as well, so it's really, the improvement example. So for me.
Okay, then I want to thank our speakers who joined us today physically here. That's always an added value. So thank you very much for being here, for your interesting presentations. And before closing off this, I think, very interesting day, maybe just a brief summary of the session in the afternoon. So I think when we look at impacts of energy saving measures or energy efficiency measures in the group, let's say, or in energy poor households, I think what comes to the forefront is that they're not always what we would expect from the first sight. So they're not always on the energy saving side. There's indeed the rebound factor we talked about that comes up often, and I think the impacts are probably, that's also what came out of the presentations today. They're more often on the secondary benefits, comfort, health, economy, maybe these kind of topics. So maybe not where we would expect it from the first instance, but it's important to look a bit broader. Then I want to thank you all for being here, for joining us online as well, of course. And for the people that are joining us physically here in the room, there is a feedback form on your seat, and we would be very happy if you could fill that out before leaving. Thank you.